The wind howled through the narrow streets of the small town like a living thing, rattling windows, bending trees, and smothering the world in a thick blanket of snow, and Marcus Johnson, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s with calloused hands and eyes that carried the quiet weight of responsibility, hunched against the icy gusts as he trudged home from another grueling 12-hour shift at the auto shop, his jacket worn thin, his boots splitting at the seams, but his mind focused on the one thing that kept him moving through the storm, his 8-year-old daughter, Lila, who was waiting in their small apartment with homework spread on the table and a half-cooked dinner she was trying her best to prepare because she knew her father was too exhausted to cook. Marcus had never imagined life would come to this, raising a child alone after his wife had abandoned them years ago, juggling bills that piled higher than his paycheck, staring down eviction notices taped to the door, and yet, in the quiet of his heart, he held on to a dignity forged by struggle, reminding himself each morning that as long as his daughter smiled, as long as she believed in him, he could endure anything. But tonight the storm tested every ounce of his endurance as the streets disappeared under the blizzard's fury, the few headlights on the road sliding past like ghosts, until, through the veil of snow, he noticed a pair of faint hazard lights blinking weakly from a car stranded on the roadside, its tires buried deep in drifts, and though Marcus could have easily walked past, his fingers were stiff with cold, his stomach empty, his own problems pressing down on him like weights. Something inside him would not allow it, for he had been raised by a grandmother who taught him that real strength was shown not in what you did for yourself but in what you did for others when no one was watching, so he stumbled through the snow toward the vehicle, squinting against the blinding white, and when he wiped the frosted glass with his sleeve, he saw a woman inside, trembling, her expensive fur-lined coat dusted with frost, her hands clutching the steering wheel though the car had long since died, and her wide eyes, startled and fearful, met his. Marcus knocked gently on the glass and motioned for her to lower it, but when it wouldn't budge, he shouted above the storm, his deep voice carrying warmth despite the cold, "You okay in there?" And after a moment the door creaked open, a blast of cold air rushing in as the woman stammered, "The car, it just died, and my phone battery. It's gone, I've been here for hours, I don't know what to do," her voice breaking under the weight of fear, and Marcus, without hesitation, shrugged off the thin blanket he carried in his work bag for emergencies, wrapping it around her shoulders, ignoring his own shivering as he told her, "Don't worry, we'll get you warm and get this car running," and though she looked at him with disbelief, he was a stranger, a man covered in grease stains, worn clothes, and weary eyes, there was a steadiness in his presence, a calm resolve that made her breathe a little easier. Crouching under the hood, Marcus tried every trick he knew, coaxing the dead engine with frozen hands, but the cold was merciless, the battery utterly drained, and after nearly an hour of futile effort, his body shaking violently from the chill, he realized there was only one choice. He would have to trek nearly 2 miles back through the storm to the only gas station still open, buy a portable charger and some tools, and return to try again, and when the woman protested, saying, "You can't, it's too far, you'll freeze out there," Marcus simply gave a tired smile and replied, "I've walked through worse, and I'm not leaving you here to freeze," and before she could stop him, he set off into the night, the snow whipping against his face like shards of glass, his mind flashing back to the nights when he had nothing but his determination to keep moving forward, the same determination that kept him alive now, step after brutal step until at last the faint neon glow of the gas station broke through the storm like a lighthouse, and he staggered inside, buying a thermos of coffee, hand warmers, and a jumper kit with the last $20 he had in his pocket. Money he had set aside for groceries, money that meant skipping meals until payday, but he didn't think twice, because someone's life was worth more than his hunger, so with numb fingers clutching the bag, he trudged all the way back, every step heavier than the last, until he finally saw the blinking lights again, and when he reached the car, the woman gasped in relief, her eyes brimming with tears as she whispered, "You came back," and Marcus only grinned faintly, setting to work without ceremony, connecting the jumper, pouring every ounce of knowledge into coaxing the frozen vehicle back to life until, at last, the engine roared, a warm growl against the howling wind, and the woman laughed with joy, tears streaming down her face as she reached for her wallet, insisting she pay him, but Marcus shook his head firmly, replying, "Keep your money, just get home safe," before handing her the thermos of coffee, telling her it would help warm her hands on the drive, and though she pressed again, begging him to at least take something, Marcus only smiled, waved, and turned back toward the storm, eager to return to his daughter, who would be asleep by now but who always left a little drawing on the table for him to find when he came home late. The woman sat in her car for several moments, watching his figure fade into the swirling snow, her chest tightening with something she could not yet name, because she had met many people in her life, businessmen who fawned over her wealth, acquaintances who smiled at her fortune but never at her humanity, but never someone like him, someone who gave without expectation, who carried himself with quiet nobility despite having nothing, and as she finally drove off, her car humming under the revived engine, she whispered his name to herself, for he had mentioned it only once, casually, when she asked who she should thank if she told the story. Marcus, he had said, as though it were unimportant, and she repeated it softly, committing it to memory, never knowing that this night would change not only his life but hers as well. Marcus, meanwhile, trudged home, exhausted beyond words, his body aching, but when he finally reached the small apartment and opened the door to see Lila curled up on the couch with a book in her lap, waiting for him despite the late hour, her little face lighting up as she cried, "Daddy, you're home." He felt the warmth of love surge through him, enough to banish the cold, enough to remind him that no matter how hard the world became, kindness was never wasted, even if it seemed to cost him everything, and as he tucked his daughter into bed, brushing the hair from her forehead and kissing her goodnight, he never imagined that the woman he had helped in the storm was not just a stranded stranger but Evelyn Monroe, a billionaire who owned empires of steel and glass, whose decisions shook markets, and who had spent years searching for authenticity in a world that only saw her money. And as she sat in her mansion that night, staring into the fire, she thought of Marcus, the mechanic with nothing but his dignity. And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt hope that maybe there were still people worth trusting in this world, people worth helping, and she resolved that she would not forget him, not now, not ever, and thus the storm that threatened to bury everything in cold and silence had instead lit the spark of a story that was only just beginning. One that would intertwine the lives of a weary mechanic and a lonely billionaire in ways neither of them could have foreseen, and though Marcus closed his eyes that night believing tomorrow would bring the same struggles as always, fate was already shifting beneath his feet, preparing to turn his act of selfless compassion into the seed of a transformation beyond anything he could imagine.